going to roll camera and roll sound?
Rolling.
Or you rolled on the test
Can you,
camera?
Carrie, can you angle it just slightly to me? Got it. Speed on B.
Jim Mulligan, interview, take 3.
I said we were talking about food, and
Just 1 second, Jim.
Good catch.
Okay.
one of my big projects on food was in Alcatraz after Stockdale left, and I didn't have anybody to tap to except occasionally Flash to Tanner. So I was obsessed with food, and a lot of people built houses. I didn't. I built pantries, and when I had the pantry built, I then filled it, and that was one of the things I was going to do when I got home. And it was so much etched in my mind that when I got home and got out of the hospital and got into the house, I was trying to convince my wife that we had to buy $3,000 worth of food and build a big pantry, and I had this all squared away, and she was taking me by the hand to the commissary, to Kroger's, to Farm Fresh, and to convince me that I really didn't have to buy $3,000 worth of food. We could get whatever we wanted. But it took her a couple of weeks to really convince me, because I felt really, I needed to have a big wad of food that would last 6 months anyway. But she handled that real well, and after a while I finally decided, well, I really don't need that much if I could just drive 5 minutes and go here.
Yeah. I'm going to tilt this. That's such a beautiful story. Louise, you're a treasure, Louise.
Yeah, she certainly is, yeah.
We lost the second audio channel on Atmos again.
Okay. Well, we have it on here. Okay. All right. That's such a great story. I love that. We have a rare opportunity to look inside the mind of the collective leadership of the Hanoi prison system because of the roommates that you had at Alcatraz.
Right.
First of all, if you could describe who was at Alcatraz with you, and then we're going to get a little bit into your conversations with Stockdale.
Well, Alcatraz.
What was Alcatraz?
Alcatraz was the quote from the Vietnamese, the bad camp was going to be and the bad camp was going to be the culmination of the Make Your Choice program, where they would identify prisoners into 3 groups. A small group that could accept what they were pushing, the vast majority that, it's not their fault, but their culture they can't accept, and then the small minority that would be actively resisting them and leading the others to resist. And so after they went through this big program, they settled on Stockdale, when they tortured him, went down the list of the guys that would take over. And it was Stockdale, Denton, myself, Jenkins, Rutledge, and Sam Johnson, because Sam had been living with Stockdale. And so that was the very first selection that went there. Now, Shoemaker had been a POW for number 2, and Shoemaker is a very, very astute guy, and he has very excellent hearing. And I don't think he ever got caught at anything, and he violated everything there ever was. He's just that shrewd. But they knew something was wrong soon, so they threw him in that situation. And Tanner got thrown in because he had written this fictitious story about Clark Kent defecting from his squadron, and they published that all over the world, and some of our anti-war visitors brought that thing in and showed the Vietnamese how Tanner had humiliated them, so they threw him in there. Stores was a real problem because he was German, and he would refuse to bow, and they would beat him into submission, and he'd stop again, and they'd do it again. And he was just a thorn in their side, so they threw him in there. And then the last two people were Coker and McKnight, who had escaped overnight just before we opened Alcatraz. And so they threw them in there. So, except for Coker was by far the youngest. He was 23 when he was shot down in August of '66. So in October '67, he is thrown into Alcatraz, and a wonderful guy, you know, with all the.
I'm going to ask you to pause for 1 second till the jet goes over, because I want to make sure we hear what you're saying.
Right.
All right, you were speaking about George Coker.
Yes, he was 23 years old when he was shot down. And you know, I turned 40 7 days after I shot down. Denton was a couple of years older than I was, and so was Stockdale. And we had kids that were, young Jerry Denton was flying combat in Vietnam in helicopters at that time. So you had the disparity. And I always felt kind of bad about George being thrown into that environment, because he was really not a career officer at that time. He was just really getting started, and it was a very, very difficult experience for him to be thrown into this tortuous type of deal, merely because he escaped what he handled very well. He's a wonderful young guy. But Alcatraz was really a challenge, a super challenge to us. Everybody there earned their way there one way or another, big time. And it's pretty well accepted throughout the POW community that Alcatraz was the bad camp. The 11 Alcatraz guys were the starting 11 for the POW movement, which is pretty nice to say. Pretty nice to say that it's almost all Navy-led. Pretty nice to say, okay? A great, great accolade for the United States Navy in producing the leadership that it did. And everybody understood that. The number one question when I came back from Hanoi, and I was one of the first guys in Washington, Denton and I were the only two senior guys up there. Why is it that all the camps were run by Navy guys at that time? Well, it was because of the leadership, okay? Robbie Risen, the Air Force colonel, light colonel at the time, he's senior to Stockdale, but he was kept out of the system. He was never really in the system. And, you know, I always used to pray for Risen every day, because they put his picture on the front cover of Time magazine, and then he went back to Vietnam and he got shot down and captured. They treated him something terribly. But I think the solitary experience is, for me, was the largest challenge. Solitary is a very, very difficult experience, particularly in the solitary that we did. We had 3 solid walls and a solid door. A lot of times you didn't even have any communication. I didn't have any communication for 3 or 4 months at one time in solitary. And solitary without any outside stimulation. No write, no read, you don't see anything. So you do what the Schwings call infantile regression. You live your life backwards. And in my own particular case, I was able to go back. So I started in my marriage and my family to school and grammar school back to Lawrence, Massachusetts, until I can get to my very first memory was with my grandparents when I was not quite 2 years old. So if you're in solitary long enough, you can pretty much recollect quite accurately what's going on with your life. And it was a very, very interesting experience for myself. I don't expect to go through old age because I'm 92 and a half right now, working on 93, but I've already been through old age and solitary type of deal. I've relived those memories, you know. But it was, solitary is a type of challenge that I physically would rather be physically abused and tortured than get stuck in solitary, frankly, you know, anytime, you know, because torture ends and you're back normal. But in solitary, particularly when it goes over months and years, and you know, Stockdale and Denton and Jenkins and Rutledge, they all had more than 4 years, okay? Myself and Johnson, we had more than 3.5 years. We were shut down approximately 6 months after Rutledge and Stockdale and Jenkins. So that group had a great camaraderie. The Alcatraz group is a very, very tight organization, even though we live with each other, but not with each other in the same circumstances. And you know, when the torture program started, you know, who was getting tortured, and the programs would go from 1 week to another week to another week, and it was, it's what welded us together was the difficulties of staying alive in Alcatraz, you know.
How did you formulate the leadership decisions you made in Alcatraz that you knew would be broadcast eventually over the entire camps? You and Stockdale could speak about these things, I assume. Can you tell me about
I could tap to him. No.
What was the nature of the challenges that you saw and that you had to...
Well, the challenges were for early release. That was a big challenge. How could we establish a policy for early release? We knew that was coming, and we decided very early on that we would oppose early release 100% across the board. And we decided that to enforce that policy meant that we had to have contact with people right from the start. And in some of the early release cases that went on, for the most part, they really never got in the system. they pulled them out very quickly, so that they didn't understand the program. And we were very, very appalled that these guys would do it. There was one guy that got out that we really wanted out was Hegdahl, and Stratton took care of that. That was wonderful because Hegdahl was the only one, the only release that I know of that brought anything positive back to the States. The rest of the people that came back from that group were people that were not really in the system, maybe long enough to be part of the system, or maybe just they were weak people. I don't know. I'm not passing judgment on anybody. But I do know one thing, that Hegdahl brought good information back, and actually Stratton instructed him in the first time that Hegdahl had an opportunity to go, he didn't go because he didn't want to leave the system. And Stratton got in touch with him and directly informed him that if he had another chance to go, he had to go and he had to do this, and he was ordered to do it. And if he didn't do it when we get out, he was going to get a general court-martial from Stratton. Scared the hell out of that kid. And he did get out, and that was very good. But our resistance policy, was already established pretty much, and it had been established right from the start, really in the hard years. When Denton started in July of 65, and really put the hard line in position, it just grew from that. The code of conduct really set the rules of behavior, okay? It's almost like the 10 Commandments in everyday living. The rule of conduct for us really prevailed. Okay? The only one weak spot on it was the interpretation of the escape clause, where people felt that if they didn't try to escape, that they were not abiding by the code of conduct. And it was a very hard time to get through to people in Hanoi that when you're going to escape, you have to have a chance of escaping. You don't go over the wall in the middle of Hanoi going outside knowing that you don't know where you are or where you're going, you have no contact, and you're going to get picked up, okay? We were very concerned about one of the escape attempts was not approved, and cost us, we lost a guy because of that. And we almost lost some very, very important intelligence because of that. And so it was the escape problem in Hanoi really had to be regulated, because if you were to get out, we had to be sure that if you got out, you could get out. You just couldn't attempt to escape. And I think that that interpretation was changed when we came back. That's the only change in the code of conduct that was made when we first came back. There were big efforts to throw it out, as you know, in the military and by a lot of people in Washington. And we, a whole bunch of our seniors went back up there and we fought that tooth and nail, saying how valuable it was to have a set of rules of behavior in concrete that everybody could understand and live by. And yet the liberalization of the anti-war movement affected military thinking. They thought, hey, man, we get rid of this thing. You don't want to get rid of that thing. Eisenhower put it in for good reason after Korea, and it served very well in Vietnam. I don't know how it serves today in the type of war that they're fighting. That's a different story. But for us, the code of conduct really was it was a Bible. Okay.
Can you speak to me, sir, about back US, what those words mean and how it came into being? I'm assuming you and Stockdale.
No, I had that. That came in when they had the big split, and they moved maybe around 20 people from the Hanoi Hilton and opened up a new section in the Hilton where we had Stardust and all the Vegas areas were named for Desert Inn, etc. They brought what they considered the troublemakers and put them in there. And that was right early in 1967. And when that happened, Stockdale came into the system for the first time. But when he came into the system, Denton had been running the camps, and so they put Denton in, they had a place they called the Mint. It had 3 cells. They put Denton in cell 1, and then cell 2 was empty, and then they put me in cell 3. And we were separated. We didn't have any comm with the rest of the guys in that whole area. We were separate. But Stockdale was out there with Jenkins and Rutledge and Tanner and all those guys out there. And that's where Stockdale put out his policy, back U.S. Denton and I were not part of that. We were incommunicado. I'm struggling with the words.
This fly is bothering you, and
Uh-oh.
It was on dead on my shot, so
Yeah.
he's just starting to go into back US, but it was there for a full 2 sentences.
yeah, no, I saw it. I didn't want to interrupt him, but yeah,
I apologize.
no problem.
So during that time frame, see, that's where Stockdale took over. This is the first time he's really in the system. And of course, he's now running that section of that camp. And that's where he came up with back US. And that's where we had the big communications torture. And that's where, when they finally identified Stockdale as being senior to Denton, that's when they tortured him, and that's where he gave the list of if they got him out of line, Denton was next, and Jenkins and me and Rutledge were in line, and Sam Johnson. That's where that line came from. He gave them lists of the senior guys. They tortured him for that. And in the meantime, the rest of the guys were in the system, and some of them were being transferred out. And so they were able to bring the policy, the back U.S. policy that Stockdale came up with, to various camps, okay? And from that group, see, we got there in probably the end of January, and then we went to Alcatraz in October. And during that's the time when Stockdale was running things. After Denton and I were in the Mint, incommunicado, they put us together in the Stardust, and we only had very limited communication, but we were in leg stocks all summer long, so we were out of it. And we didn't know anything that was going on except they had a big communications purge going on. We weren't part of it because they just locked us in leg stocks, so we were out of that thing. But that's where Stockdale came up with the policy and put the policy out. Then we went to Alcatraz, and those guys that were left, probably 20 or 30 of them in there, those guys had the policy, and they were the guys that spread it out to all the camps. See, they opened them.
What did you see as the importance of that policy?
Well, from where we were at Alcatraz, we had no idea, except that we knew that the policy, this policy was out. Back US was out. That was the policy for all the camps, and it was pretty well received from what I know. See, being in solitary and so removed, even when we got back in the system, I was never in the system. When we got back after after Alcatraz, we went back to the same area in Denton. Denton ran that camp from the time we got back in December until the next fall. Stockdale was in there, but he couldn't run because he was isolated. Isolated. And in that time frame, that area had really got 60 guys in it. And when the Alcatraz guys came back with Denton and myself and Jenkins and Rutledge, they had been rolling along. Stockdale was there, but he is not part of it. They had him isolated off there. And so we got that group back online real fast. Took us about a day and a half. Junior McCain came in there after that. That's where he popped up. We knew he was a POW, but didn't know where, and he ended up in that area with us, and we were able to get out his physical condition, that he was okay. You know?
It might be safe to say that torture revealed to you the face of your enemy, but solitary revealed to you yourself. And when you describe the experience of solitary,
Yes,
the difficulty of it, and you talk about it regressing you,
yes,
every former POW I've talked to describes something similar, that in that solitary experience, you arrive at, and it may be beyond all your memories, is who you are. What every POW describes something of the same experience. They're going through this shoot-down experience, suddenly being thrust into a new world that, as I think it was Porter Halliburton said, or maybe Paul Galanti, for the first time I smelled what Vietnam smelled like. Like, until then I had flown across the tops of it. Now suddenly it was a real world. So you're taken into this experience and reduced. But each former POW describes something similar. That on the other side of feeling like they failed and they lost, someone reaches out to them and says, we're all in this together. We've all been broken. We can fight again another day.
right.
And it's the beginning of finding something essential about yourself. You, sir, demonstrate an amazing core of conviction. And I can only assume that part of that you found in solitary, because it's beyond any description of yourself. For the young midshipman, the young officer in training of tomorrow, who's constantly on their cell phone, on Twitter and everything else, distracted by so many things, what can you say to them about discovering that core of who they are and how important it is?
You know, life is worth living, and it's a very meaningful experience. It's not a transitory romp in the movies. The realities, the hard realities of life come to almost everyone, passes through some phase of their life, whether in the military or not in the military. They're going to have certain challenges, physical, psychological, economic, well, all types of deals. It's how you handle these challenges that determines really who you are, determines how you handle the challenges. And you have to stop and think once in a while of who you are and what type of person you are. And for myself, I like to think when I look myself in the mirror that I'm pretty content with my life at 92 and a half years. I made a lot of mistakes like everybody did. But overall, you know, I am content that I played the game pretty good. And it's been a wonderful experience with its ups and downs. And I think every once in a while, you should stop and really look at yourself in the mirror and see if you got your self-respect, okay? You can lie to everybody but yourself. Those inner bad thoughts, those inner failings you have, that everybody has. You look in the mirror, they come right back at you, okay? So I think for military guys, a military career, it's a serious career. You're basically putting your ass on the line for what you believe in. And if you don't believe it, then why bother do it, okay? All right? These United States, it's a wonderful experience, the best human experience that has existed during history is the United States of America, where individuals are really respected as individuals. And, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, which we take for granted, that's really not true in most of the world, okay? Even the economic freedom you have in our system, where you can start from nothing and be a billionaire if you work hard, if you want, if that's your goal. But as a military guy, I guess when you go into the military, you better realize that it's going to make some demands on you, okay? You have to stand up to those demands. The country is giving you a lot, but they expect a lot in return, okay? And if you're a military officer, you should strive to be the best military officer you can be. You're a leader. And as you grow older, you'll have more responsibility, and you'll have the responsibility of many young people who need your guidance, okay? And the type of person you are determines what kind of leadership you have. Look at the wonderful leadership that we got out of World War II, okay? We got a man who led us into Europe, General Eisenhower, who later led NATO, who later became the president of Colombia, who later became the president of the United States. And where did he get his background? A Kansas kid that went to West Point, okay? There are a lot of Kansas kids that go to West Point or Annapolis or from someplace, and they get their character there, that where they develop it, okay? I have great respect for the military people. The one thing I liked about working in a military situation, I always found that by far, for the most part, somebody said they're going to do it, they do it, okay? You do things with a handshake, okay? And you develop respect and confidence in your fellow people, particularly in combat. Combat brings people together, okay? The Hanoi experience brought those guys together, okay? Collectively, they were better than they were individually, because we all gained something from each other, the young and the old. But I would not relive my life over again. Anyway, I was a 17-year-old kid from the Depression that got into World War II and wanted to fly for the Navy. And that's what I did. And when I was out and Korea broke open, I volunteered and came back in right away. I only stayed a couple of years because I couldn't become regular Navy. I didn't have a degree and there was no way to get one. So I got out and got a degree and then I came back in the Navy. So I'm really a professional military guy. And I'm a professional military guy because by education and by family background, I was an anti-communist from the word go, both from my family and my church and my education. So I felt that the big thing during my lifespan would be to resist the communist expansion that would be aimed to overcome the things I believe in this democracy. That was my motivation, okay? And if I had to do it over again in the same way, I'd do it that way, you know. Mainly because I believe in freedom. I believe in the U.S. Constitution. I believe in the Judeo-Christian tradition, okay? My roots go back in Christianity and actually politically goes back to Greece. If I'm alive in years 1,000 and years 100, I'm a Roman centurion, I'm a warrior, okay? That's just who I am. In the 20th century, I'm a warrior. I'm just a naval aviator doing this job. And I'm content with that, because I think that job helps bring the better good if it helps perpetuate freedom as I know it. No, freedom doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come free, you know. You know, jet noise really is the sound of freedom, in big time. That's what it means to me.
And what does it mean to you to be part of the Navy? Speak to me about the Navy.
Being part of the Navy, you know, the Navy will always be part of my life. You know, it's I have found it to be it's a wonderful organization. It has its ups and downs like everything does in life. But it was a life's experience that's well worth living, okay? I like the discipline of the Navy. I like my flying career. I had a wonderful flying career. I was very, very fortunate. When I first got in the Navy and right through to my present time, I didn't want to drive a ship or push a submarine. I wanted to fly airplanes. I wanted to fly airplanes from a naval aircraft carrier, and that's what I did. I have flown from the World War II carriers and the large carriers, after World War II, the Coral Sea and Roosevelt in the Midway, and on to the regular, spent time on the Saratoga, the Independence, and on to the Enterprise. And so I came through aviation from Stearman's to the A4, my last combat hop. And during that time, aviation completely changed. And I was part of that change. An experience I wouldn't give up for anything. It was a wonderful experience, okay? And I enjoyed the challenges. You know, they were at times frightening, but challenging and enjoyable. Part of a war is mix, I think. Basically, as I said, if you put me back at the year 100, I'm a Roman legionnaire or a centurion or something. So I guess the spots don't change the dog.
Carrie, what's the timing? 10 minutes. When you returned, and your fellow POWs returned, the Navy started conducting batteries of physical and psychological evaluations, and a remarkable thing began to surface, that the control group of fellow officers who served in Vietnam had incidents of PTSD over 39%, whereas in your group, who underwent torture, isolation, malnutrition, it's under 4%. You were by and large healthier, more well-adjusted, more, in the words of every single one of you I've talked to, you came out better than you went in. You wouldn't want to wish that experience on anyone. You wouldn't want to repeat it, but you came out a better man than you went in. Can you speak to me about that? To what do you attribute that?
For me, Hanoi was a growth experience, intellectually and physically and emotionally, particularly the last 18 months. I was privileged to live with really talented people, Stockdale and Denton and Jenkins and Rutledge, and I lived with John Flynn and Dave Wynn and Norm Gaddis, they all made flag right away, and it was really a great experience to be right in the middle of that group. They're all high, everybody's a high performer. What I think happens to you is in the growth experience is that the challenges that we met changed every day. There were no 2 days exactly like what was going to happen to, even in solitary. It was there was always pressure, some type of pressure. Okay. And I think that enabled a lot of guys to really grow, because just surviving is a challenge. We had guys that died. They just died because they gave up on themselves, okay, for one reason or another, unfortunately. But I think I have a theory about naval aviators because I have a wide experience in aviation. And in the period that I came out, it was a very hazardous profession. So I told you, I used to spend about $100 a month for $10,000 of insurance. That's the rate deal. And during the 40s and the 50s and the 60s at that time, it was my experience. This is general. You take 100 naval aviators, commission them, stick them on the ship, let them do a 3-year tour, let them come back, do their shore duty or whatever they're going. Now they go back for their second tour. You don't have 100. Probably got 60. The other guys either left the Navy or doing something else, or they have self-selected themselves into a different non-strenuous situation. You come back for your third tour as a lieutenant commander type of stuff. And at 60, now it's down to 25 or 30, okay? And they self-selected themselves. The challenges are still there, but people drop off. And so, particularly in naval aviation, the naval aviation community is a small community when you get down to it. But when you look at the leadership that goes across the squadron commanders and the XOs and the ops officers and the air wing commanders, you see guys who love the business they're in. And they ignore all the threats to their security, you might say, in the hazardous business. And they sort of bond. And you know the community. And that's a great fighting community when you get that type of compilation of people who are in the business. And that's the reason the aviators did such a bang-up job, okay? And they're still doing it, okay? These kids working today, they're flying 7, 8, 9-hour hops and taking care of targets that have to be taken care of, and they're working hard at it. But they're a small group, okay? A very small group, and they're kind of people I like to associate with. They're my kind of people, you know, straight up, you know. If they don't like something, they'll tell it to you right to your face, okay? Right?
And one final question before we break for lunch. Sir, in your opinion, what is a hero?
What is what?
A hero.
Oh, guys that throw themselves on a IED to protect their friends. Guys who pay the price, and we have them today, walking around with no legs and no arms and stuff. And those are real heroes. They go above and beyond doing the best of your duty when you're in that, if you find yourself in that position. And I don't really think many military people find themselves in that position, okay? I think certainly in World War II we had heroes, guys who rose to the occasion and took a particular incident, put their life on the line for their fellow deal, and won a particular victory over something. Paid the full price. Okay, we've had. I think, for my part, I don't think you can be an aviator and be a hero, okay? But if you're a ground pounder, you can be a hero. Because aviators, it's not a personal type of a deal where you can sacrifice yourself for somebody else. But if you're in the ground type of deal, well, that's a different story. There are occasions that arise where some guys just, they're going to hell to get their buddy out, and if they get him out, so that's a hero for me, okay? I don't measure heroes by the number of medals they have, okay? You know, but in another way, you know, everybody that does his job to the best of his ability and is very good at it, they're, in a lot of ways, they're heroic in relation to Joe Smo, who doesn't do anything, doesn't put his butt in the line. But when you put your own butt on the line for what you believe in, that's a heroic action, okay? And it doesn't have to be just in the military either. It can be done a lot of other ways, okay? Sacrificing yourself for your real beliefs, that's heroic.
You want a break? Let's go ahead and cut. We're going to take a break. We got some lunch for you.
Patrick, can I go in for one thing?
Yep, hold on one
Because I'm
second.
gonna forget to ask. If I could get the captain to tap again the good night code, and if you would yes, I'm gonna go into.
You want me to do it on this?
What you did before, exactly what you did before.
You know?
1 second, let me get in there. Yes, sir.
And actually, maybe put your knee down so he can
Right.
get a good look at it. There we go, perfect.
Good night, God bless you. The end. Sign off. You know what they never could find out? They could get the code, and they knew the code. And they would try, you'd be in solitary with the empty cell here and empty cell there. Or maybe you have a POW here, you here, empty cell there. And they would try to get you. So they pull this guy out for a quiz. When he goes out for a quiz, come back, he comes back an hour later, you think. You don't know, but you say a door shut. And then they get on the wall and they go, you hear this noise. Sit in the middle there, because you know, there's a Vietnamese on the other side, he's trying to tap you. You just tap on that wall once, you're getting tortured, okay? What they didn't know, and they never figured out, the call-up sign was as the answer, right? Shaving a haircut, 2 bits when I was a kid. That was the secret call sign. And the Vietnamese didn't, but they knew we did something, so they would go, and they'd sit and wait, and you hear that, mm-mm. And they never figured it out in 7.5 years. And they knew the code as well as we did. Yeah,
And they couldn't figure out your shorthand either.
yeah, that's for sure, yeah.
All right, let's take a break. Let's go. You good, Kent?
Yep.
All right, let's cut.
Cut.